Welcome to Artistic Adventures. We're back to our Elizabeth I doll, and this is part 4. We're going to be working on her fabulous court dress. Here's a couple of pictures that I'm going to be sort of going by. I did mention in the past that I wanted to do those big hoops behind her head as well as the lace collar, so that's going to be part of my design. And this one, you can't see the hoops behind her head quite as much, but it's similar, but all of her dresses are just very elaborate and lots of jewels. So that's what we're going to try to achieve with our dress. And let's get started. So we have our doll. I covered up her face so that I wouldn't mess up her face up. And this will be the front of the bodice. That's going to come down over the skirt in a point. And I'm just sort of measuring it now to make sure I have room for seams on the sides as well as the shoulders. And then I used that to sort of do the side part of the back, but I'm making the side parts of the back longer because I want to be able to fold those under, since there'll be an opening there to allow us to get the dress on the doll. It's not going to come off the doll, but it will be on the doll because I couldn't get it off. I glued too many things together. You know me. All right, so that's how it will look after we've turned the edges under. Those are the two back pieces. And then for the front, I wanted the edges to be rounded so that we can see the underskirt underneath. That will be actually open in the front, and then we'll gather that up, sort of like that. And then we'll sew the top parts together after they're gathered, but then the underskirt will show. I'm going to make the underskirt out of this sort of sparkly sheer material, and that'll be gathered up so that it looks gathered underneath, and then we'll have the two front pieces on top of that, so it'll look kind of like that. And I like the way these colors of these two things match really well. All right, and then the back is going to be open down a little bit in the back seam, just also so we can get it onto the doll. So those will be turned under in a seam, and then you can see that I've cut the sides so that they sort of bell out at the bottom. It's hard to make a skirt like this and have a lot of gathers in the waist for these dolls because their waists are so small and you can only gather so much material. All right, these are the sleeves. So I'm trying to make the sleeves have that big mutton look that we talked about in the first video. So they'll be narrow around the wrist and poofy up at the top, and then full down the arms. And that part will be gathered up there. All right, so we've got our sleeves cut out. We've got our front, our back. Now I'm going to be using this pearl trim on some of the areas to help with finishing the edges. So like for the front part, I'm going to use this along the edge at the bottom. I'll glue that on, and that will finish that edge, and I won't have to worry about turning it up or hemming it. And also do something similar on the neckline. So make use of that pearl string. And now I've also, off camera, I did put the fray check around the edges so that it wouldn't unravel. Now we're going to start by sewing the two shoulder seams together for the front and the back pieces. So right across there, that's the shoulder seam. So we'll do one at a time. And it's such a small space, takes about 4 stitches. And then we have our shoulder seams together. And now, while it's open like this, because this is such a small thing, we're going to go ahead and sew the sleeves in right across there. So we're taking the sleeves and we're going to put a gathering thread across the very top on both sides, and then now that that's in, we're going to pull it. And on any of these, if you get, since we're gathering such a small space, sometimes when you pull it, you actually pull the thread all the way through and it comes out. If you tie a knot on one side and then pull from the other side, it will help. So to put the sleeve in, we're going to put the middle of the sleeve to the shoulder seam so that those are both in the middle. And then I take the ends of the sleeve where the opening is on the bodice, pin those, and then I just sort of work my gathers in from there back to the shoulder seam. And we're going to sew that together, take the pins out, and that's how it looks. We have our nice poofy sleeve. I like the way that turned out. Very nice. Looking just the way I want it to. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing with the other side. Get that sleeve in. And then once we do that, we can sew up the under part of the sleeve seam and the side seams of the bodice. And then that's really pretty much it for the bodice, except for the torture of turning those little sleeves. That's always so hard. I did that off camera so you didn't have to see me struggle with it. And then after I had the sleeves turned, then the other part is to sew the edges up on the back where the opening will be. Alright, so that's how it looks before I turned it. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew those, hem the back sides. And now, before I go any further, I want to go ahead and try this on the doll so I can see if I need to make any changes. Maybe make seams bigger or smaller or whatever. And make sure that I have everything sewn that needs to be sewn before I go any further. And to do this, I'm going to take the doll's hands off. They pop right off for the Monster High. Now, the first thing I noticed is that the sleeves are way too long. But that's okay. We can fix that. That's just a little small adventure. That's not a dangerous adventure. And pretty happy with the way it's fitting. We're going to have to cut out some of the neckline, but that's okay. Let's see. Easier to cut it out than trying to add it back, right? And now I'm sewing that back seam up for the back so that we can have a finished seam there where it opens. And then that's pretty much it for the bodice. Let's go ahead and work on the skirt. Alright, so we're going to take this gauzy material and run a gathering stitch across the top where the waist will be. And then we can gather it. One thing I noticed with this material, if your needle goes through one of the sparkly things, you can't gather past that. It's like it locks it. So like you have to gather from one side and then the other. And now I'm hemming that part of the gauzy skirt. Alright, now we're taking the two front pieces that have the curved opening in the front, and I'm going to hem that curved part so that we can have a finished seam look on the outside, and just go ahead and come around to the bottom part and hemming the bottom of the skirt. I'll do that on both sides. And this material actually is working really well. I didn't actually put the fray check on this part, and it actually hasn't come undone very much. So I'm really liking it. It's really a nice brocade. Alright, so the next part is to put the gauze underneath the two front pieces, and I'm going to pin those together so that I can just sew it straight across. And I'm sewing a gathering thread so that I can just pull it all as one piece, and then go back on top of it and sew a regular seam to lock it down. Then we're going to take our two back pieces, and the first thing I'll do is sew up that back seam, and we're going to come down about 2 inches and start sewing to leave an opening up at the waist. And once we have the back seam, then we go up to the part that's open and turn those edges back like that, and then we're going to hem those so that our opening has a finished hem. And just sew down one side, come across, and right back up the other side. And there's our opening. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hem the bottom of this too, so when we sew it to the front part, they're both already hemmed. And that looks nice. And then we can put our gathering threads in the back part on either side and get that gathered. And then we'll be ready to sew the two side seams together. Their waists are so small. This is always a hard part because, you know, you want to have a nice full skirt, but you can only pull these gathers so tight, and it really doesn't make a very full skirt when you do that. And that's why I had to bell out the bottom of the front and the back to give it a little more fullness. So now we're ready to sew the side seams together, and I'm just making sure that I catch that gauzy material as well when I sew it up. So I want that to be part of the side seam. So that gauze part is only in the front, it's not in the back. Now you could have made like a completely new petticoat, but I always try to avoid adding material at the waist because it just makes it bulky. So even now I have extra space pulling this together, but I'm going to make it work. And now's about the time that I figured out something that I made a mistake. If you listen to my first video, you'll know that I didn't actually plan to put this gauzy material as the underskirt. I actually planned to use this gold material, and I completely forgot when I started putting it together because I've been through 3 or 4 other videos since then. So the problem is that the gauzy material is see-through, so you can see her legs through it. And I realized that once I put it on the doll and started looking at it. So what I'm going to have to do is make a little petticoat out of this gold material to put underneath, because I do think that the material is nice and I like that it matches. So what I'm going to do is take this gold material, I'm going to get it started with the sewing machine, leaving a little bit at the end so I can pull it, and then I'm just going to stretch that elastic as much as I can stretch it, and then sew it to about the size of the doll's waist, which, as you can see, it's not much. This is why it's hard to gather a straight piece. And I tend to do the large circle a lot of times to get fullness in the skirt. So I'm going to put that little petticoat on. And after, I did this, I kind of liked the dimension that it gives it, sort of that slim skirt underneath the big voluminous skirt. Kind of gives it a nice look. That's just, an adventure, right? We always have adventures on this channel. Some people call them mistakes. I call them adventures. All right, now we're ready to try the bodice of this dress on over the skirt. And I still have the hands off at this point, but I did roll up the sleeves underneath so that they'll be a little bit shorter. And then I'll be able to gather the ends of that just with hand sewn thread and pull it back in so that it's tight around the wrist. So I just want to make sure that I have everything fitted the way I want it to be. And then I go ahead and close up the back. So those, going ahead and put the hands back on just so I can get a proper perspective of the length of the sleeve before I sew it down. It's nice that their hands come off because with their fingers spread out like that, it's really hard to get them through some of the sleeve holes. They get caught on everything. All right, so this is how it looks after I've attached the back together with glue. And then I cut out the neckline a little bit, and I'm going to put this antique lace that my friend Deb sent me around the neckline. Now, keeping in mind that Elizabeth's dresses were really, really elaborate, they're the ones at least that she wears in her portraits, and they're full of jewels and beautiful lace. Lace was really prized back then and very expensive. So even though to us lace sometimes looks like I don't know, sort of plain. I don't know how to describe it. Like when you look at it just now with just the lace on it, it doesn't look royal. It looks sort of like a pretty dress. But I'm going to put some pearls on top of that in a little while, and we'll dress it up. And we're going to do some other things to the dress to make it look a little bit more elaborate. But I do like the lace because it was part of her mini dresses. I'm going to use this pretty gold trim now that I've put a thread around the wrist part and drawn in those that part of the sleeve. I'm just going to take this gold braid and wrap it around and glue it on top of the wrist. So yeah, this dress is going to be the one of the ones that won't come off. Sometimes I do that just because I can't get the look right without doing that. And to get this really slim wrist look that she had with these big sleeves, this is really the way that I'm going to choose to do it. All right, so now off camera, I did go ahead and put the pearls on the bottom around the top, and also put a little bit around that gold braid that I put on. You can see how it goes around up in the back. I did that because I kind of had to, do it a little bit at a time, let it dry, so it was time consuming. And this is the lace that I'm going to use for the ruffle in the back. It's already ruffled a little bit, but not enough, so I'm going to put a gathering stitch in here and then pull it really, really tight. So we've got this really tight ruffle. And I didn't have to worry about stiffening it. When I first started, I thought I was going to have to, like, maybe put glue on it or something. Sorry about the dogs. My husband just came home and they have to greet him properly. Anyway, I didn't have to stiffen it at all. It stood up pretty well. Plus, I'm going to put that big loop thing behind it. So I just glued that down to the back of the lace collar. It doesn't come all the way around to the front. And that also helped it stand up some because I glued it standing up in that position. And the edges, I just turned those back and hand sewed those down so that they didn't look raw. Then after that, we're going to be working on those big hoops that go behind her head. Now to do that, I'm going to use this gold wire and use that to make a frame that we'll put the fabric on. So I'm just sort of measuring here how big I want the hoops to be. And then I go off camera, make a couple of those loops, and this is how they turned out. And I just twisted the wire at the bottom and made sure that they were big enough to go behind her head. Now I'm going to take the fabric, that sparkly fabric that I used on the dress underskirt, and put some glue on the edge, the top edge of this wire. I'm using the E6000, of course. So just put that on the top. Just run a small bead around that. And then we're going to stick the fabric to it. I'm not going to worry about the back because this material is see-through. It really kind of looks okay from the back as well as the front. Now if you wanted to put on the front and the back, you could. You just have to put glue and fabric on both sides. So I'm going to glue that down, put it on some aluminum foil, and then I had to trim that one edge and then fold it over and put something heavy on top of it and let it dry. And that will make sure that it's flat and the glue gets stuck all the way around. So I let that dry for a while and everything turned out great. So I'm going to go back and trim the edges really tightly against the wire. I don't want the fabric to stick out. And then I'm going to take some more of our pearls that hide all of our issues, our edges and mistakes, and glue that around the edge also. So we're going to do that to both this side and the other hoop on the other side and let those dry. Now we're going to have to overlap them to get the right look as it kind of crosses over in the back. So once I figure out how much it needs to cross over by giving it a eyeball with it behind her, then I can glue the two pieces together. So let's check how it looks, see if it looks good like that. And it does, sort of like a dip, almost a heart shape really, which I kind of like. And then I'm just gluing the two edges together, put the aluminum foil and then put something heavy on that so that it will stick together well and dry. Now Well, this is going to attach up at the top, right under the collar. And I'm going to use this long gathered piece of that fabric. And when we glue this on top of the wired pieces, it'll fold down over it. So we'll glue the edge down and then fold it back over it so you won't be able to see anything. Now the next step, while we're waiting on that other thing to dry, is to put some crystals on and bling out this dress. Yeah, we need some major bling for Queen Elizabeth because she liked her big bling. So I've got some like sort of a soft gold color crystal, as well as a light green and also a dark green. And I start off just putting it inside the flower. And I'm just, mixing it up, putting different colors in different areas. And then after I had finished doing the whole dress with just those colors and putting it on the flowers, I felt like I needed even more bling. And also, I really felt like this dress needed red. So I also had some red crystals, and I just sprinkled those around just in different places on the fabric. Not really on the flowers because I'd already put the other colors on the flowers. So there we got a lot more bling going. And you can see the hoops behind her head with the lace, and then how that cape thing we glued and it came down over everything. So I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I think it looks regal, and we added enough bling that it gives it that look of Elizabeth's dress. So now let's take a look at some still photos so you can get a little bit better look at everything. This is the whole view. Notice my doll's head got some red from the dye on her head, but we'll cover that up when we put the wig back on. This is a little closer view of the dress with the details and all the crystals. And then a side view showing how that beautiful cape poofs out in the back. That would have been pretty dramatic walking down some entranceway, I think. And that's how the back looks. It's nice that the cape can cover up our wire glued onto the dress. And that's a view from the other side. I really like how the sleeves turned out too. I think I had the right look with the muffin sleeves. And a final look at the whole dress. So where do we go from here? She's got her beautiful dress, and we're ready to do some final touches. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on a pair of shoes for her. We're going to do some jewelry and a hat, and then we'll do some finishing touches. So next video may be the last one. We'll see how long it runs, and if not, I'm going to split it into two. But be sure and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks, and bye.